Might be hearing a lot of questions, a lot of the same questions. Are you ready for Christmas? That's right, every day. But that seems to be the question that the whole world is asking. And people this time of year get so caught up in themselves and traditions, especially at Christmas, that we can forget all about Jesus. In fact, it's probably why somebody started this phrase years ago that Jesus is the reason for the season. Isn't it sad that we need a reminder? We don't need a catchy phrase for any other holiday or season. But come Black Friday, the way people cut up and act, the world needs a reminder.
Yes.
And speaking of reminders, this is a familiar story that Matthew shared about the wise men visiting Jesus and bringing gifts. It's believed that Matthew wrote this book for disciples in the early church about 50 to 75 years after Jesus' birth to show how Jesus is the Messiah who fulfilled the prophecy of the Old Testament. It's a good thing he wrote it too, because some misconceptions have risen from this story. And Christians, of all people, ought to have the facts straight. First, we don't talk about the star that much, but the star is significant. The star fulfilled the prophecy of the Old Testament in Numbers 24:17. It says, a star will come out of Jacob, a scepter will rise out of Israel. This oracle was spoken by Balaam, who was the prophet, and he came from the eastern mountains, and the Magi came from the east. Another thing that people often have a misperception about is that there were wise men, plural, meaning more than one, but not necessarily three. There could have been 2, there could have been 100. Matthew is the only gospel that tells this story, but he doesn't say exactly how many wise men came. And finally, the Bible does not say that they arrived on the night of Jesus' birth.
Amen.
In spite of what the media portrays, in spite of what you see on your Christmas cards, Matthew does not say exactly when the wise men arrived. So I encourage you to go home and read this story. It's a short chapter, because the world has questions, and Christians ought to know the story of our Savior's birth. We ought to know it well enough so that we can answer people's questions and refute error when we see it and hear it. And so with the help of the Lord this morning, I want to speak to you from the topic, the world has questions. Most important in this particular passage is the question that the wise men and King Herod asked. Listen again as I read the first 6 verses. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. So they said to him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, but you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel. In this passage, the world is asking, where is Jesus? And God's people have the answer. The same applies today. The world is asking questions, and Jesus has his disciples here on the earth to provide answers. The wise men had a question and a clear motive. Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. They were attracted by Jesus' star and followed it, expecting to see and worship the King. Again, the world has questions. Matthew does not say that the rising star the Magi had seen led them to Jerusalem. They went to the capital first because they thought, hear me now, they thought it was the natural place for the King of the Jews to be born. But God had created a star to guide them on their journey. Amen. And when they got just 5 miles from their destination, they started thinking for themselves. That's how we get off track sometimes. God gives us directions, but we decide to take a detour. Their intention was good, but they lost focus. We do too. It's our intention to make Jesus the reason for the season, but then we decorate, we shop, we wrap and exchange gifts, we go to parties, we travel, we visit loved ones, we deceive little innocent children about presents. We watch sports and movies, we eat too much, we drink too much, we spend too much. We wear ourselves out. Then when the bills roll in and the bank account runs low, then we remember Jesus. If your activities are not focused on him and don't honor him, then he's not the reason for your season. In fact, that would be more like Herod. King Herod had a question too. He sincerely wanted to know where Jesus was. But Matthew made his motive clear: pure selfishness. He was infuriated by the thought of a younger man taking his kingdom. When you read the rest of this chapter this week, you'll see that King Herod was an old, power-hungry, crazy man. He was so crazy that he had his favorite wife and her 2 sons, which were his sons, executed because he thought they were conspiring against him. So for Matthew to say that he was troubled and all Jerusalem with him, that's an understatement. Everybody was scared to death, especially the priests and the scribes. And I imagine that they had some questions like, what's he mad about now? Who's next? But Herod wants to kill baby Jesus. Herod is the politically correct society we live in today. He doesn't want us saying Merry Christmas. He wants you to say Happy Holidays. He doesn't want to be reminded that Jesus is the reason for the season. But he wants your money. So his stores will be open until 9 p.m. on Christmas Eve, and you can shop online 24/7 with guaranteed delivery. He wants to keep you stressed out and distracted by material things instead of being focused and being at peace with Jesus. Herod is everybody who takes advantage of the reason of the season, but has no interest in Christ. But let's not be too quick to judge and criticize Herod. After all, he's family. He's your husband, your wife, your son, your daughter, your brother, your sister, your children, your grandchildren, All those loved ones you keep coming up here to the altar to pray for, week after week. That's Herod. The people of the world, the people who don't know Christ, and the people who have questions.
Yeah.
What are God's people to do with these questions from the world? Their questions can be hard, like, why did God let my child die? The questions can be mocking. If Jesus is coming back, what's taking him so long? The questions are sometimes accusing. Why should I go to church? I'm just as good as you are. But Herod's question was simple, but his motive was selfish and deadly.